me, this land is really, really sacred. There's this threat of more geothermal plants coming to the island. It's really devastating to us to know that big business might come and move in here and take over.
Is it really fair?
Won't the government protect us if industry makes a mess?
What's preventing this industry from being regulated?
In 1982-83, the state government of Hawaii established rules of order of the development of this resource.
There was some clearly defined rules in the Hawaii statutes to protect the community from developments that actually affect them. And what happened last year was Act 97 was enacted, and that got rid of the geothermal subzones. It got rid of a lot of the protections that were supposed to be there in that kind of development, and they got rid of the county involvement.
You can build a geothermal industrial plant anywhere in the state of Hawaii. You can do exploratory drilling anywhere in the state of Hawaii with a simple permit from the Land and Natural Resources.
What about all the hundreds of people who live here with their families and who take care of this land?
We need to reclaim control of our lands.
Another thing I'll be working on is trying once again to pass a bill that undoes the worst aspects of Act 97, at the very least to restore county oversight to the geothermal planning process and to restore the right to contested case hearings.
Residents have repeatedly appealed to the government, business interests, and academics for protection and help.
I don't understand why exactly, other than political influence or corporate influence over politics, why the Department of Health always takes the side of the developer, but that's what's happening.
If you add up all the various cuts that go to local government and state government, it adds up to about $1 million a year.
I wonder if that influences the decisions being made.
They give the royalties to the state, the county, and Oahu. But for the community, the Hawaiian people said, hey, you come in here and there's no benefit.
More of this money needs to go for protecting the people and the environment. Puna residents are still waiting for PGV to carry out the recommendations of the Environmental Protection Agency report on the last blowout.
In 1991, we had a blowout. It sounded like a 747 right in our driveway. I think it measured 84 decibels. We had to scream to talk to each other. I had nerve damage. The screws in our house came undone. Our door fell.
Those wells and the associated plant was constantly leaking. I mean, they were fined by the Environmental Protection Agency. The state health department basically refused to act. We did engage the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. They did come out here and they took some actions. The PGV was fined for its failures directly from the federal government.
Is it being monitored and regulated well?
If the government gives a permit, they should be regulating. If there's a leak or a problem, the government should be notifying us that there's a problem. But what really happened is I would smell gas, I would call PGV's response line and the Department of Health response line, and I would say this is happening, and I would be told every single time, no, there's no problem at the plant, you're imagining it, it's just the papayas rotting in the back. And I would insist, and I would insist, and I would insist, and inevitably an hour later PGV would call and say, oh yeah, a flange broke, basically the gases ate through the flange, we found the leak, we'll get it fixed. They would fix it within an hour. But we would do this dance, and it could be daily. Like, why am I the one reporting your leak? Something's wrong when you don't know it's leaking.
Here's a situation where you have residences and farms and people living, doing their day-to-day lives, and there's this plant, and for us it's a mile away. but there's other people who are much closer. And this noise of the drilling, I mean, you wouldn't believe what a terrible noise it is.
Their most recent incident caused them to vent substantial quantities of H2S into the community at levels that could be health-threatening if you were not a healthy individual. I would ask the State Department of Health if they have a criteria for exposure for children. Well, they don't. But yet they'll let these quantities out into the community where you would expect to find young children or people with pre-existing conditions. Any signs on the road say you're entering a hazard zone? I don't see any. We've asked for them.
A USGS survey that was done in 1990, and it talked about the hydrology of the region, not only in our water table but offshore waters. And one of the interesting facts is that this whole East Rift zone, from the rift on down to the ocean, is made up of very porous rock. And so there's no water dikes or solid rock to prevent water from moving. So the prediction was, and the statement was, that water or fluids injected into back into the earth would have a high rate of travel. They said that in a matter of years, in 1990, that it could spread several miles in each direction, most likely downflow and towards the ocean. So that fact being said, the study was done over 20 years ago, and there haven't been any monitoring of our water table, potable water for the region, and there hasn't been any baseline studies of offshore water. Especially in Pohoiki in recent years, I've noticed a remarkable decline in offshore animal, including fish and turtles and manta rays that used to regularly visit Pohoiki Bay.
There's rules that they're supposed to comply with, and they actually do collect monitoring data, but it just seems to go into a black hole.
The damage to the central nervous system, probably the damage of most concern from hydrogen sulfide, is caused by peak exposure and not exposure over time. All regulation is done as a matter of exposure over time. The second problem is that there are only 4 sites that are used to monitor hydrogen sulfide concentrations at the perimeter of the plant. Those 4 sites are insufficient. They measure the concentration only in those 4 directions. There can be much higher concentration in another direction. And the biggest problem is that to overcome the deficiencies that I've already described, they need to know the amount of hydrogen sulfide released, but the regulators are not currently requiring PGV to calculate that amount.
The Environmental Protection Agency has recommended that monitors be set 5 feet in the air at the level of people breathing. The gas being monitored is heavier than air. The few existing monitors at Puna Geothermal Venture are 12 to 15 feet in the air.
New monitors being obtained now will hopefully be placed in the correct lower position.
The monitoring system doesn't work, so we do not know what the levels people in the community are being exposed to.
It's not enough for us to leave it up to the EPA, who assigns it to the State Department of Health, who assigns it back to the developer to monitor our water sources. We need an independent measurement of our water, and that should be reported to the public on a regular basis.
People in an area need to have control over what happens there.
If through dirty drilling, if through geothermal fracking, you poison your local environment, then after the corporations pull out and their shell companies, their local fronts collapse, you and your children and your grandchildren are left living in the mess, left living in the toxic waste dump for generations to come.
It's a basic human principle. If you take care of the land, the land will take care of you. If you don't, then you better watch out. So, and it's not only a Hawaiian belief, but it's a human belief, and what we're doing to our land right now is against all human common sense. And I think that, you know, in these kind of cases, we don't use sense. We just look at corporate profit, and anybody in the profit margin that's getting a pocket fill will say, hey, it's a good thing.
We need to have the world take notice of this place where everyone knows as a paradise. We're being threatened here in paradise with an extinction of something that is most precious, and that is the purity of the place itself and its ability to sustain life in such an unimaginably powerful way.
So I'm going to ask all of the Kanakas and Hawaiians who have come along with us and our allies, they have supported us all this time. You know, allies of the land, allies of the ocean and the air, and just of Mother Earth. You cannot do this.
In my opinion, it's our sacred duty, our kuleana, our sacred responsibility to take care of this land and protect it so that we can leave it to our children and for the next generations and generations to come.
When people work together, we can make a difference.
It's a challenge for me to see the aloha in these giant industrial activities such as geothermal. It seems to me that it's hurting the land, and all I want to do is love the land, help the land, restore it to something beautiful, something harmonious, something that will continue to teach me to be human.